I'm just going to repeat a little bit of what I talked about last week, just to kind of let you know why, as the Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center, we decided to host this event. And so we're super thankful that you're here. We're thankful for your commitment to want to learn more about how to talk about life and the sanctity of life and how to protect life. And just to learn a little bit, we're going to touch just real quickly on the proposed amendment. So abortion in the state of Virginia is legal through 26 weeks, 6 days already, and really to birth if you get two doctors to say that it's detrimental to your health, which includes your mental health. And as you know, especially if you were here last week, there is a proposed amendment that has already passed the House and Senate, the first step to getting that on our voter ballots next fall. And so there's an election going on now. Of course, it's an off year, so we wanted to draw attention to that. And while we're not a political organization, we don't endorse candidates or parties in any way, there are times when legislative matters weigh so heavily on the work that we do and the people that we serve that we cannot stay silent, and we need your help. And so this is one of those times, and so we put the Bootcamp together just as a way to draw attention to that, as well as just to educate and help equip you to have more of those kinds of conversations around life. So the reason that it is so important is that if this were to pass and become a constitutional amendment, it becomes a fundamental right to abortion, which changes things from right now it's just legal through 26 weeks, 6 days. When it's a fundamental right, the language that is in the amendment is super vague, but it means that anyone who's seen as interfering, intervening, infringing on someone's right to an abortion can be most likely prosecuted. And so that would mean that at the pregnancy center, where we offer information about options, but we don't provide abortion, just by the fact that we don't provide abortion, we can be seen as interfering with someone's right to seek an abortion. And so that's one of the reasons it's so important, not to mention it's just egregious and not needed. But legal experts believe that could open the door to some devastating lawsuits or new regulations that would make it nearly impossible for us to continue serving the women who need us the most. So, imagine a future where our center is shut down, not because we did anything wrong, but because we infringed on someone's fundamental right to an abortion. So, imagine a Virginia where there is no voice left that would offer women real choice. So the amendment's already passed. Like I said, the first step, it passed 49 to 51, and they did vote true to party lines, so I'm not going to capitalize on what that is, but you can guess. And so we have an opportunity with this upcoming election. We need to maintain the seats that voted for life now, and then we need to flip some seats that did not vote for life, and that's mostly in Northern Virginia. So if you have friends or family up there, please make sure that you share this with them, how important it is, first of all, to vote. Is there anyone here, if there's anyone here who's not registered to vote, Teresa Pregnall, she is our Virginia State Director for Concerned Women of America, and she's got a table back there as well as a table to register people to vote. So if you're not registered and you're 18 or older, a resident of Virginia, please see her tonight and get that taken care of so you can vote. But if we can flip those seats, then their next step is to vote on it again in January. So if we can flip the seats, then the amendment gets killed on the House floor, which is what we are praying for. We hope that you will pray for that as well. And it will never go to voter ballots. If we don't flip the seats and it gets passed, it goes to voter ballots in November. And we already know that 65% of Virginians will vote yes. So it'll be pretty much a done deal, barring a miracle of the Lord. So anyway, we're just trying to get the word out on how important this is to vote. And so anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But we do have some information on the little table on your way out. If you weren't here last week, I do have a news sheet, which is a governor candidate comparison. It's this. Again, not going to tell you who to vote for, but you can read and decide for yourself if you vote for life and vote biblical values, you'll know who to vote for pretty quickly. And then if you weren't here last week, in addition to that, and these are things you can just pick up on your way out, there is a little information from the Family Foundation on the abortion amendment, where we are in the timeline, and then on the back, it removes all parental consent and notification. It removes conscience protections, so for doctors who don't want to perform abortions, they will not have that option. There's all kinds of mess with it, so it's on there. And then this just tells you a little bit. Since in the last few years, we have had 5 new abortion facilities open in the state of Virginia. And we are now an abortion destination state because all the states around us have banned or restricted abortion, and people are coming across state lines to get their abortions here in Virginia. So our abortions in the last 6 years have actually gone up 103%. So we want to fix that. And then there's this report card back there. But anyway, all that's back on the table. That's just for you to grab when you come out tonight and share. If there's a lot of them, so if you have people that you could share that with, feel free to take some extra copies. But we're so happy that you're here. Thank you so much. We have a great evening planned. We have 2 speakers, Dr. Dave Paulus, who is our one of our male patient or male client advocates. He meets with dads to help them walk through that pregnancy decision. And he's also our abortion pill reversal provider. And so thank you, Dr. Dave, for being here. And then after Dave, you'll hear from Dr. Sheila Furey. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Dave. Before I do that, let me just open with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much that you are the author and giver of life, Father. You knitted each one of us together in our mother's wombs. Lord, you knew us before we were even formed, and we just thank you for that. Lord, help us to stand for life, Lord. Help us to be bold and courageous, Father, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves, Lord. And for the moms and dads, Lord, we know it leads to destruction. And Father, we just thank you for Dr. Dave and for Dr. Sheila and just for their wisdom and knowledge, Lord. We look forward to what they have to share tonight. Father, help us to learn from it and grow from it and just share it with others, Father. We do ask, Lord, for your defeat of this amendment before it ever goes to voter ballots, Lord, please. We ask it in your precious and holy name. Amen. So Dr. Dave retired 3 years ago after 40 years of family practice in Iowa, Nebraska, and Virginia, together with his wife, Joan, who's here with him tonight. They have 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, 6 of whom live in Lynchburg. Dr. Paulus loves volunteering as a men's advocate for Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center and also loves doing a lot of babysitting. So he's been giving the When Does Life Begin talk from a medical perspective for the last 2 years. And as I mentioned before, he serves as our abortion pill reversal provider, and we are very grateful for him. So please welcome Dr. Dave.
Okay, I'm going to have to restart this. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, if you can't, let me know. So, hi everybody, I'm Dave Paulus. I'm a family physician. I retired 3 years ago from New London family practice, and as Jane said, I've been volunteering at the Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center, which has really been a blessing. I've really enjoyed that. You know, the number one factor, whether a woman is going to abort or not, is what the father of the baby is, what their interest is, and whether they're going to support her or not. So we really try every time that a dad comes in for one of the male advocates to meet with them and to help them, you know, through that whole decision process, as well as sharing the gospel with them. So it's really been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it. And then more recently, I've been involved with, we've got a team together at the center that does abortion pill reversal. So let's see here. Well, I might need your help, Landry. I promise it was working earlier. I spoke at LUCOM a couple years ago, and all the audio-visual stuff went out. And so I'm yelling, trying to talk to the students that are in the upper chambers, and you know, it was obviously a spiritual attack, and I hope that's not what's going on here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So if you read quickly, you'll know my speech. Okay. So the things I'd like to cover, and I'm going to apologize a little bit ahead of time. I'm going to cover a lot of ground here, and I'm sort of sorry, but I'm not really, because I think it's all important. A little bit about my medical school and the miracle of human embryology. That's what I want you to take home from this, just what a beautiful thing it is. Responding to pro-choice arguments, issues regarding abortion, what does the Bible say, and how can we help? So I started medical school 1976 at the University of Iowa, and that was 3 years after Roe versus Wade, legalizing abortion in all 50 states. I wasn't a Christian. I was very much pro-choice, as were the majority of my classmates. We even had during my second year in medical school, we spent a day in the University of Iowa abortion clinic, of all things. I look back on that with shame, but one of the first classes that I took was human embryology. And now, come on. Okay, here we go. So, the sperm enters the egg. This yellow structure is called a corona radiata. It forms immediately after the sperm enters the egg to prevent a second sperm from entering. So the egg provides 23 chromosomes, the sperm 23 chromosomes. They form what are called pronuclei. They migrate together, and they fuse together to form 46 chromosomes in that one cell. So Northwestern University a couple years ago figured out that if you use a fluorescent microscope, at the moment of conception, there's actually a flash of light, which I think is, I mean, that's got to be God. I mean, that can only be God. In that one cell, there's 46 chromosomes made up of 3 billion nucleotides. And if you unraveled all the DNA and you put those little strands together and stretched it out, it would be 5 feet long. So in this one cell, there's an incredible amount of genetic material.
How many did you say?
What's that?
How many nucleotides did you say?
5 feet.
But how many?
I'm sorry?
How many? You said.
In one cell, the DNA, if you take all the fibers and put them end to end, it would be 5 feet long.
But did you say something about how many nucleotides it was?
3 billion. And those are the pieces that go together that form the helix. So it's incredibly complicated. So the ovary releases the egg into the fallopian tube. Most fertilization occurs in the distal part of the tube here, so it takes about 72 hours for the egg to reach the ovary or the uterus. So in a situation where the egg cannot pass through the fallopian tube, or even situations where the fertilized egg might go out the end of the fallopian tube, that's called an ectopic pregnancy, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So these are just some of the changes that occur in the first 3 weeks of life. And as you can see, it's just an incredible amount of complicated processes that are going on. But I use this slide to remind me, in embryology, terms like zygote, embryo, fetus are very important and useful because they describe certain areas of development. But oftentimes those same terms are used to dehumanize developing babies. And I've heard this, and it makes a lot of sense to me, that a better term is to use preborn, not unborn, but preborn. And I really like that. So during that first 3 weeks, there's a process called gastrulation. And I don't know if you can see it up there, and I'm not going to use my arrow because I keep flicking to the next slide, but the bottom layer of cells is called the endoderm. That goes on to form the digestive tract, the lungs, the tonsils, and the thyroid gland. The blue area is mesoderm, which forms muscles, the skeleton, and the cardiovascular system. The white layer is ectoderm. That forms the skin, hair, nails, and the nervous system. So, and I have to take a risk here. This is a 3-week-old baby in development, and then down here we have a full-term baby. So just to put it in perspective, this 8-week-old baby is about 1.5 inches in length, so tiny. A 16-week baby about 7 inches, and then a full-term baby would be 18 to 19 inches. So at 3 weeks, this is 3 weeks after fertilization, 21 days, there's already cardiac activity. Amazing, 3 weeks. Now it gets confusing because we don't use the period of time after fertilization. We use what's called gestational age, which has to do with the first day of the last menstrual period. So instead of 3 weeks, this would be considered 5 weeks gestation, and that's the terminology I'm going to use to describe the rest of this, because that's what's used in medicine and that's what's used in legal terms. So this 4-week baby is, 6-week baby already is developing eyes. If you do a transvaginal ultrasound, you can see the heart beating already. 7 weeks, if you can detect brain waves at 7 weeks. 6 weeks, arms and legs are present. 9 weeks, this baby's already moving inside the uterus. 10 weeks, all organ systems are formed. They're just in the process of maturing. 11 weeks, this baby is developing teeth, can suck his or her thumb and responds to stimuli. 16 weeks, this baby can smile, can grasp, has fingerprints, and this is when the mom generally starts feeling the baby moving. 26 weeks, this baby is practicing breathing and responds to light. So most abortions occur from 6 weeks, which is from here until 12 weeks, which would be these babies here. But as Jane said, in Virginia, there's unrestricted abortion up to 27 weeks, which would include these 2 babies as well. So this is an 8-week-old baby. And I was looking at my slides the other day, and my 3-year-old granddaughter's walking along, and she just glances at it and she says, "baby." And like I was telling Ron earlier, that probably could have been my talk. Just because babies, children can say that is a baby. But yet you hear terms like clump of cells, this is tissue, or kind of this euphemism that it's a pregnancy, abortion interrupts a pregnancy. Well, it doesn't interrupt a pregnancy, it kills a small, beautiful baby. And again, this is 1.5 inches in length, but you see how much development has already taken place. So a human being is genetically unique. If you look at that first slide that I show you, all the genetic information that individual is going to need for the rest of their life is present. It'll determine whether they're going to be male or female, the color of their eyes, the color of their hair. All genetic traits are already present in that one cell. And it's different than anybody else's DNA, except in the case of identical twins. A human being is human at every developmental step, even those early stages. That's still a human being. There's rapid growth in the womb, indicating life. And the baby is always distinct from the mother. It may be implanted in the lining of the uterus. It may be attached by the umbilical cord. But the baby always has its own DNA, its own circulatory system, and sometimes even different blood types. So a baby is a living human being from conception. And even the secular embryologists generally agree life begins at conception. So a more recent pro-abortion argument, they'll say, okay, maybe human life does begin at conception, but they're not persons. And because they're not persons, there's no ethical problem with aborting them. And generally, their arguments fall into 4 areas: size, level of development, environment, and dependency. But size, by definition, is relative. I mean, we don't consider a large person more of a person than a smaller individual. And in fact, in our society, we tend to protect those that are weaker. It just doesn't make any sense. Environment, again, if a baby's inside the uterus and then 5 minutes later after a C-section is outside of the uterus, it's still the same baby. So where the baby is present shouldn't make any difference. Dependency, if you take a 6-month-old infant, they are certainly dependent on everything. But yet, we still consider them persons, and we would never think that we have a right to kill them. Or an adult with disabilities. They may be very dependent, but yet they're still persons. So when Roe passed in '73, this term viability became very popular. And basically, it's you have a right to abort that baby up to the point of viability. So viability is when a baby can live outside of the uterus. So in 1973, that was about 28 weeks gestation. And just recently, I heard about a baby at the University of Iowa that was saved at 21 weeks. And he's a year old now, and he's doing great. So viability is changing. And as time goes on, that number is going to continue to go down. So it's an arbitrary designation. So this is what's used the most, level of development. There was a bioethicist at Princeton who fortunately has since retired, but by the name of Peter Singer, and this was his big thing, personal awareness. So in order for a person to be a person, they have to be aware that they're a person. So if you take that 6-month-old infant, he would argue that's not a person, but which is a ridiculous argument, but that's how it goes. And this is a very important statement. I'm going to read it slowly. A developing baby, and this goes back to that single-cell fertilized egg. A developing baby always has the capacity and ability to direct his or her own internal development. Yeah, that baby is dependent. It needs the mother, it needs the uterus, but yet it still has the capacity and ability to direct its own development. So you look at brain development. We know a brain isn't fully developed till age 23 or 24, but yet we wouldn't consider a teenager less of a person than an adult. So personhood also begins at conception. Any other definition is arbitrary. Come on now. So, this has been Planned Parenthood's motto for years. Every child should be a wanted child. So their rationale is if a child's not wanted, they should be aborted. And the irony in the United States right now, there's over 2 million families wanting to adopt newborn babies. Their other rationale was if all these unwanted babies are born, they're going to be abused. And so we need to abort them. And so since 1973, despite millions of abortions, child abuse cases have actually quadrupled. And in fact, many people really think that abortion has affected the way our society views children, the worth of children. So this is a really hard one, pregnancy from rape and incest. And obviously, these are horrible situations. Perpetrators need to be brought to justice. But the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-abortion organization, they did a study a few years ago, and they looked how many abortions are done from rape and incest. And even one case is way too many, but what they found, it amounted to 1.5% of all abortions. So a pretty small percentage, but yet you listen to politicians, they'll use rape and incest as a reason why we need to have unrestricted abortion. We were in Charlotte a couple of weeks ago at the CareNet conference, and I learned a lot of things there, but one was this Elliott Institute looked at these women long term, years after they had gone through rape or incest and aborted. And 80% of those women later indicated that abortion was the wrong choice. All the women that either went through adoption or parenting, none of those women regretted their choice. So, and again, I don't want to minimize this. These are horrible situations. But anyway, fetal deformities in the case of incest are extremely rare, and even if they do occur, those babies still deserve to live. So what about if a woman's life is at risk? And in the last 40 years, I mean, in the amount of time that I've been in practice, prenatal care has improved so much that almost every medical problem can be controlled during a woman's pregnancy now. So it's very rare that you actually see these conditions. So an exception is the ectopic pregnancy. That ectopic pregnancy is not going to survive because the baby's not in the uterus where it can obtain nutrition. And the danger is these pregnancies can rupture, they cause life-threatening bleeding, so they have to be removed either through surgery or methotrexate. The other situation is when a baby just dies naturally and for whatever reason the uterus doesn't expel the baby, and then the risk is infection. And so those are situations where surgery may be indicated, but in both these conditions, either the baby's already dead or will not be able to survive. So if one of these conditions develops during the last third of a woman's pregnancy, instead of abortion, the treatment should be delivery because these babies are likely to survive. So every state that has passed pro-life laws has exceptions for if a woman's life truly is at risk. Prenatal fetal abnormalities. So in my years in practice, I took care of many children and adults with Down syndrome. And those of you who have been around folks with Down syndrome, you know, they're wonderful people. They were some of my favorite patients. You know, they're happy and loving, and in general, they enrich the families from which they come from. But sadly, the estimate is 90% of these babies now are being aborted in the United States. Prenatal tests have value, not to be done with the idea that if they're abnormal, that the baby needs to be aborted, but they can predict problems that the baby may have, especially at the time of delivery. A disabled person is a valuable, worthy person, regardless. So there are conditions, especially chromosomal abnormalities, where the baby is probably not going to survive, at least not very long after birth. And so this area of medicine, it's actually a branch from hospice called perinatal palliative care, where the baby is kept comfortable, kept with the family. They can hold the baby until the baby dies. And they found that these families do much better, especially the moms do better with mourning the loss of these children than if she has an abortion. But in general, that's the way it has been treated in the past. So if you just look at primary moral reasoning, It's wrong to kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being, so abortion is morally wrong. Now, what's really concerning is you'll hear more and more this term personal reproductive autonomy. And basically, the pro-abortion folks are taking this and running with it, and so they're challenging that first statement. Is it really wrong to kill an innocent human being if it interferes with my personal reproductive autonomy? And that is an argument that is really hard to have with somebody. And then it really comes down to a heart issue. And I think that's the next level that is going to be happening with the pro-abortion folks. So how common are abortions? We know these numbers are underreported because many states have very lax reporting requirements. But in 2024, it was estimated that there was at least 1,176,000 abortions, which was up 120,000 from 2023. So abortion numbers were coming down. In 2016, the numbers were down to 638,000, which was almost half of what they were in 2024. So what happened? And the thing that's happened is chemical abortions, and we're going to talk about them in a few minutes. But they become so popular and so widespread. But this amounts to 3,200 abortions every day, which is more deaths than were lost at 9/11, just to put it in perspective. And this is the statistic that just still boggles my brain. Since 1973, there's been at least 65 million abortion deaths. So just let that sink in. That means 65 million people otherwise would be living today if not for abortion.
That's just in the U.S.?
Yeah, U.S. So currently, if a woman is not married and becomes pregnant, chances are 1 in 3, basically, that she's going to have an abortion. So this post-abortion syndrome is very common, despite what the pro-abortion folks will tell you. And I saw it many times during my practice. It can happen right after the abortion, but more commonly, it'll show up years later. Oftentimes, there's kind of a honeymoon period, I guess, after an abortion, and then the regret sinks in. And it's a constellation of symptoms consisting of guilt, depression. PTSD is a big factor. Nightmares can be associated with substance abuse and can be associated with suicidal ideation. So most pregnancy resource centers now do provide some post-abortion counseling. And at Blue Ridge, we've got an excellent program. Many Christian counselors also are very good at helping women work through this horrible syndrome. So let's talk about the abortion pills. Mifepristone, which used to be called RU-486, and misoprostol. Now, mifepristone blocks the effects of progesterone. Progesterone is a female hormone that's very important early in pregnancy, and what it does is it develops the lining of the uterus and the placenta and allows those two structures to come together so that the baby can receive nutrients. It also prevents contractions and helps prevent a dilation of the cervix. So if you give a drug like mifepristone, it blocks the progesterone receptors. So the way it kills babies, it causes a separation between the lining of the uterus and the placenta. So 24 to 72 hours, the second drug, misoprostol, is given, which causes the uterus to contract and expels the baby. So these drugs were approved in 2001 with very few safety studies, but they did have restrictions. They could be used only to 7 weeks gestation. They had to be seen, women had to be seen by a physician 3 times. An ultrasound had to be done, be sure they didn't have an ectopic, to make sure they weren't beyond that 7-week restriction. And the medication actually had to be dispensed by the physician in their office. But in 2016, a lot of those restrictions were lifted. You only had to see a physician once. Now these abortions could be done up to 10 weeks. And an incredible, I still can't understand this. They took away the requirement that any adverse effects that occurred from the abortion pills, you no longer had to report them. The only adverse effect you had to report if a woman died after taking these pills. So now we don't have any data about the adverse effects of these drugs, so which we'll talk about in a minute. So then with COVID, with the excuse of COVID, now they even removed the requirement that you see a physician once. So now you can go to telehealth and you can get these medications. Instead of being dispensed in the office, now you can get them through mail order. You can get them at local pharmacies now. And more recently, I went online to see how easy it would be for me to get abortion pills. And it's a form that you fill out. You put your last menstrual period in, you know, of course, I just made that up, filled out all the paperwork and stuff, and the one thing they wanted to be sure that you had on there was your credit card information. And so it was like $175 I could have gotten the abortion kit. That's how easy it is now. Readily accessible. They're also obtained illegally through Mexico and Europe. And in fact, JAMA, which is a medical journal that's not known for being pro-life, they published a study just a few weeks ago. There's a company out of Europe called Aid Access, and it ships 84% of its doses. It sends to states where it's either abortion is legal or shipping abortion pills is illegal. And it amounts to over 100,000 dosages every year, and that's just one company that's doing that. So what are the risks? The immediate risks: nausea, vomiting, bleeding, and pain. Now, women are counseled before they take these pills that they're going to have a heavy period. But if you talk to women who have been through this, it's terrible. They have horrible pain, sometimes lasting 24 hours, severe bleeding. And most women who have had abortion pill abortions say they'll never do it again. They'd rather go back and have the surgical abortion. They don't tell you that. There's a delayed risk of retained tissue, which can cause bleeding and, more importantly, infection. There were several women last year that died from sepsis after taking abortion pills. The other risk is a ectopic pregnancy never gets diagnosed because they never see a physician. They never have an ultrasound. And so women may be having pain and bleeding from the ruptured ectopic, but they think it's an effect from the abortion pills. And so there's been several women who've died in those situations. Women who are abused, trafficked, prostituted, at least before, when they had to go to Planned Parenthood, there at least was a chance that somebody could screen and pick up these women and figure out what was going on. But now their abusers can obtain the medications through these mail order companies, force these women to take these drugs. And something that's becoming more and more a problem is people are obtaining the medications and they're putting them in women's food or drink without them knowing it. They go on and have an abortion, but they think it's just a miscarriage, so they don't even know what's happened. Fortunately, a few of these people are getting caught and they're being convicted. But what's really concerning, over the last couple months, I've had 2 men admit to me that they have obtained abortion pills, and with the hope that their girlfriend would take the pills. And you know, we talked to them pretty sternly and told them that would be criminal if they did that without the woman knowing. And I think, Jane, it's safe to say we made it a policy that we notify the women now to be sure they know that their boyfriend has these pills. But this is where we're at with these things. So we don't know because we don't have good side effect or adverse data, but most guess is that the abortion pill abortion is probably 4 times the risk of surgical abortion. And one of the things we do know from insurance data is 4 to 8% of these women end up in the emergency room for one reason or another. And maybe even the worst thing that we're dealing with now are these women with long-term emotional problems. Because you think about it, the reason they're so appealing is they think they can do this, they don't have to tell anybody, it's convenient, they can do it at home, they don't miss any work. So they're going through this whole process by themselves, tremendous pain, bleeding. Most of the time, they actually see the tiny baby that's been aborted, and this usually happens in their own bathroom, in their own shower. It's horrific. So it's no wonder that we're seeing these women with all these emotional problems. So abortion pill reversal. Since 2007, at least 7,000 lives have been saved. And it's pretty straightforward. It's progesterone. And we use the bioidentical progesterone, which is exactly what the female body produces. We get ours compounded because the brand progesterone is mixed with peanut oil, and so many people have peanut allergies, so we just get it compounded so we don't have to worry about that. But what progesterone does is it repairs that placental separation. And obviously, it works better if you catch it soon after the woman takes the mifepristone, as soon as possible. But even up to 72 hours, it's been found to be effective. Once a woman takes the second pill, the misoprostol, it's not going to work, unfortunately. So the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has come out strongly against abortion pill reversal, but they're well known as being a pro-abortion group. And the rationale is there hasn't been any controlled double-blind studies to see how well this works and the safety. But it's unethical. You could never do a double-blind controlled study on pregnant women with this abortion pill reversal. So it's just a smokescreen, frankly. Japan did an animal model that showed that progesterone is very effective to reverse the effects of mifepristone. And then Dr. Delgado, he's like the king of abortion pill reversal. And he did a retrospective study of 754 women. Most of these he had treated himself with progesterone. And what he found was there is 68% survival. Now it's not 100%, but 68% is not bad. That these were women that were able to go on and have full-term healthy babies. And what we do know, if a woman takes mifepristone and doesn't take the second drug, there's still a 5 to 25% chance that baby's going to survive, which is significant. But obviously with the progesterone, it's much better. The other thing that's really cool, they looked for birth defects or how many of these babies were born premature. There was no difference between the progesterone-treated group and the regular population. So the Abortion Pill Reversal Network is, it's a 24-hour 800 number. It's staffed by nurses who are wonderful. I've talked to several of them. And what they do, if a woman calls the number, they counsel them, and then they put them in touch with a local provider who can prescribe the progesterone and then follow them, in particular with ultrasounds, to see how the pregnancy is progressing. So if a woman Googles anything close to, I'm sorry I took my abortion pill, or what can I do? I took my abortion pill and I want to save my baby, anything like that, it'll go to their website. And something I think is pretty good. If you go to Planned Parenthood in Roanoke and you're leaving the parking lot, up on the hill there's a big billboard that has the Abortion Pill Reversal Network on it. So this is a tough one, in vitro fertilization. I just want to say something about infertility. Joan and I went through it for years. We have family members currently going through infertility. it's terrible. It is one of the hardest things a person could go through because, that's a God-given desire to have children. And you're ready to have kids, and all your friends are having kids. And so infertility is really hard. And that's why in vitro fertilization has become so popular. In vitro fertilization, for those of you who don't know, the woman receives hormones. It stimulates her ovaries to produce eggs. Surgery is done. Usually 10 to 15 eggs are removed or harvested. And then 2 or 3 of them they're all fertilized with sperm. 2 to 3 of them are put back in the uterus, hoping that maybe 1 or 2 of them will implant. The rest of the embryos are frozen. And with the idea that if it doesn't work, because it's only got about a 20 to 25% chance of working, then you have extra embryos that you can use for subsequent cycles. But a lot of those embryos are not being used, and there's estimates that as many as 1.2 million embryos are frozen right now in the United States. So they've developed another procedure called a minimal stimulation IVF, where only 1 to 2 eggs are removed. They're fertilized and put back into the uterus, so you don't have this problem with frozen embryos. But each cycle, like I said, is maybe 20 to 25% effective, and each cycle costs between $10,000 and $15,000, so it gets very expensive. The other ethical issue is you're doing this with the knowledge that some of these embryos are not going to survive. In fact, most of these embryos are not going to survive. Now, there are people that will rationalize this, and I can understand their thinking, that even in normal situations, about 20% of fertilized eggs miscarry. So, people will say, well, it happens naturally, so even if it happens with in vitro, if the goal is to have a baby, which obviously is a great goal, then it's worth that. But there's a lot of moral dilemma with it. And so embryo adoption, which is a great thing, and more people are looking into doing this because we've got all these embryos that are otherwise just going to die. So a lot of parents, they're done with their family, they'll give up their embryos for potential adoption. And probably the most important thing I can say about this, if you're going through infertility, find a good infertility specialist. Because it's very easy to do minimal testing and then just go right to in vitro fertilization because it is so popular and common now. There's a whole new area that's developing called restorative reproductive medicine because of the ethical issues with in vitro. They don't do in vitro. These are gynecologists that look for all the other causes that potentially could cause infertility. And so I would really recommend that. So what's the Bible say? God is the author of life, as Jane said earlier. So we got many scriptures of pro-life, no pro-abortion verses. First of all, value of children. Children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from Him. Psalms 127. And then, so the first command that God gave Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Mark 9, 36 and 37. So this is Jesus. He took a child and put him in the midst of them, taking him in his arms. He said to them, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. I just think that's a great word picture, to see Jesus holding that child. And I like this one. Grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and the glory of children is their fathers. This is the most important scripture right here. Genesis 1, 26 and 27, the Imago Dei. God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. So if somebody is killed That's not just a human being that's died. That's an image bearer of God that's been killed. And that's why we have the sixth commandment, you shall not murder. So Job, did you not clothe me with skin and flesh, and me together with bones and sinews? You gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence watched over my spirit. Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And this is probably the most famous pro-life verse, and it's from David in Psalms 137. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So I think this is really interesting. When did the humanity of Jesus begin? So we know that because Gabriel told Mary in Luke 1:31, behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. So, of course, Jesus has been God for eternity past, but he became a man at conception. That was when his humanity began. So then you look at Philippians 2:6-8, and they're talking about Jesus. Though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. So just like Jesus began his humanity at conception, that's when we began our lives as human beings at conception. So Jesus said this, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Matthew 25:40. So how can we help the least of these? I mean, the first thing is prayer. I mean, we really need to be praying for our country and our society and our politicians. Donate to the Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center. Financially, if you have time to volunteer, it's a wonderful organization. And this is why I'm doing this talk. Engage friends, family, neighbors. So going back to my story, my second year in residency, I'm taking care of this young Christian family. I'm still not a Christian, but looking back, this family probably had more impact on ultimately me coming to Christ than anybody else. I loved them. They were just wonderful people. I delivered their second baby. Everything was going great. She brings the baby into me for a well child check. And she asked me a question which really surprised me. She said, if I was to get pregnant and I didn't want the baby, what would you do? And I said, well, I don't, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I told her, I said, I don't do abortions, but I know doctors that do. I can make an appointment. I can set that up for you. And she started crying, and she said, you know, we've been praying for you. We'll continue to pray for you that God would open your eyes. But she said, God is the author of life. And she said, life begins at conception. So how can you do that? And she said, we love you, but we can't continue to be your patients. And that really affected me. And it wasn't long after that I was convicted that abortion was wrong. I still wasn't a Christian, but I knew it was wrong. And I made a decision that I would do my best to help women with unplanned pregnancies the rest of my career. And God gave me several opportunities to do that. So we need to make abortion unthinkable. I mean, we need to do all the other things, but in order to win this battle, we need to change hearts. And the best way to do that is to interact with the people that we have influence over, whether it be our family, our friends, people that know us and that trust us and that we can have those conversations. And then, of course, we need to vote. We need to make abortion illegal. And we also need to pass legislation to support families. So there's less reasons for young couples to want abortions. So Roe reversed, June 2022, praise God. 12 states, abortion bans. Unfortunately, Missouri's ban was overturned. 25 states now have either laws or constitutions protecting abortion. And as Jane brought up, we're in danger of that happening in Virginia. 16 states have expanded abortion access beyond Roe, and now we have 9 states and Washington, D.C. who have unrestricted abortion, and possibly Virginia if things aren't changed. So I just want to talk about the Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center for a second. So we talked to the Students for Life today, and I know this sounds sappy. I'm going to say it again. But, people will talk about there's no heroes. We don't have any heroes in our society. Well, there are heroes, and they work at Blue Ridge Pregnancy Center. This is the hardest job I know. It's a spiritual battle that these people go in and they fight every day. And they come back the next day, and they do it. As a volunteer, I may come in once a week or whatever, and but these people do this every day and fight this battle. So I can't say enough good things about them. The center, they provide counseling for pregnant women, the father of the baby, and they'll look at the reasons why a couple is considering abortion. And just as important, and they emphasize this, sharing the gospel. Free pregnancy tests, ultrasounds. Oftentimes parents choose life after seeing the ultrasound. I've seen that happen. It's a miracle. It's amazing. These abortion-minded people will come in, they'll see that baby on the ultrasound, and you see them afterwards, they got these big smiles on their face, and they're so excited to parent. It's just incredible. So the center, what a lot of people don't know, they provide a lot of referrals for prenatal care, adoption, housing, food, jobs, and obviously don't refer for abortions. Parenting classes, mentoring, and abortion recovery. So that's what I want to end with. And I'm just going to read what's, Jordan, what's in your pamphlet, wherever you are. Unhindered is a faith-based grief, loss, and trauma recovery program. We aim to provide a safe, non-judgmental space for women and men to feel, express, and work through whatever feelings they may have in regard to an abortion in their past. So it all goes back to the gospel. John 3:16, God so loved the world, he gave his son. Whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. And then Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So there's a lot of great resources out there. I really like these books by Randy Alcorn. His most recent one is the Pro-Choice or Pro-Life. I like them because they're easy to read, they're fairly small, and they cover a lot of ground. Students for Life, Allison and Dr. Latham and I were just there today talking to the students at LUCOM. It's a great organization. Christian Medical and Dental Association has helped me out a lot through the years. And the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they fight toe-to-toe with ACOG. And they take on all the arguments that are being thrown at them. It's just a wonderful organization. Heartbeat International, CareNet. If you got a minute, look at this TED Talk. It's called Conception to Birth. It was made by Harvard, not necessarily known as a pro-life organization, but it's a beautiful video showing the development of a baby. The best book out there is Scott Klusendorf's The Case for Life. It's about 450 pages, but it's worth it. And if you are truly interested in the pro-life cause, I would recommend it because it's just a great book.
So Dr. Sheila Furey is a child and adolescent psychiatrist specializing in the diagnostic evaluation and treatment of children with learning disabilities. She is an advocate for medical freedom in the state of Virginia. So please welcome Dr. Furey.
Is it work? Yes, it is. Wonderful.
She came all the way from
Richmond. So when you say I came all the whoa, he's going to adjust that for me. I used to live in Wyoming, and so if it was under 6 hours, it was close. thank you for having me here this evening. And unlike, sort of similar to our first speaker, I grew up in Iowa. And I attended Creighton University, so instead of the University of Iowa, I went to Creighton University, which is in Omaha, Nebraska, for medical school. And then after medical school, I moved to Boston, and then through a long route, ended up in Virginia. And my whole life, I must say that God has had his hand upon me. Because I could have turned, like so many others, in any direction. But one of the things I had was two parents who were active in the pro-life movement from before Roe. My father was an attorney, and he fought this at every stage of his life. He was still actively speaking at 95 years of age. And if I ever had a question, I could call him up and he would say, "Have you read this book? This is the guy you need to talk to." And I am so grateful for their guidance, their wisdom, and their example. As we look at this area, what we have seen, not only in Virginia, but in the United States and around the world, is the devaluation of human life. Human life has become a commodity. We are bought and we are sold. And those are very strong words to use in Virginia because everybody screams, "Oh, that's slavery," and we've given up slavery. We have actually enslaved ourselves by our own choices. We have enslaved our children by our choices. Because we have failed to recognize the gifts that God has given us. And we have chosen, in the face of evil, to remain silent, particularly in our churches. And as I reflect over my church life and my attending church throughout my lifetime, I can say that the number of pro-life sermons I have heard, I could count on one hand and not use all the fingers. So if we reflect on Roe in 1973, if the Christian community throughout the United States had stood, and if every pastor and every person in the pew had stood and say, "We will not support this. We are forever a pro-life nation. Our Constitution says we are going to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that life began at conception," this would have ended. But we chose to be silent, and so many of us choose to be silent now because talking religion and politics is frowned upon. And what has our silence purchased? Whenever we make decisions, we have to not only look at the immediate decision, but we have to look at the unintended consequence of that decision. And we are living the unintended consequence of that decision. Because we are a society that doesn't value human life. As a member of the medical establishment, our medical establishment has thrown the Hippocratic Oath out. Ask your doctor if he took it. 11% of physicians take the Hippocratic Oath. That should frighten everyone. What they do is they get together as medical students and they write something, typically DEI related. It doesn't speak to the long history and the obligation to care for our patients and to respect life from its beginning until its natural death. We have become convenience medicine. It's convenient to have an abortion. Excuse me, this is a child. And what does it say to our women? That we, the women who have been given the greatest gift by God, to carry a child within us. And I want you to reflect, I'm so grateful you used the story from Luke. Not only did the angel Gabriel come to Mary, and she conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit, but right after that she went to visit Elizabeth. And what happened in that story is Elizabeth was carrying John the Baptist, and the baby leapt in her womb at the presence of Christ in Mary. The recognition of the Son of God by John the Baptist from the womb. This is the power of God. This is the power of life. Life is transforming. And just as Eve in the garden took the apple from the serpent and believed the lie, so has that serpent come to women and said, it's just tissue. It's insignificant. You know, you don't want to interrupt high school or college with that pregnancy because it's going to ruin the rest of your life. And we let that be said. You know, life is inconvenient. There isn't a day that I don't have that I don't experience inconvenience. But in that inconvenience, do I have the right to take the life of another human being? And so these young girls are actually even told they're incapable. Excuse me, is that the message we want to send to women? Absolutely not. This is a little obstacle. It's a hiccup. But you can be supported and you can carry this child to term. And then you can choose whether you're going to keep the child or you're going to have the child adopted. This is strength, but it's the strength that builds character. I went through a difficult time and I was able to overcome that obstacle. Because what does the mother do when the child is 2, 3, or 4 and is diagnosed with a life-ending illness? Is she going to run away because it's hard? Because it's hard watching your child go through chemotherapy? It's hard watching your child have open heart surgery? You bet it is. And as a physician, as a parent, when my child was sick, medical school was easy, residency was easy. Being with a child who was sick, not sleeping, having a child on your chest and watching and waiting for the next breath, that's painful. But we do that. That's what mothers and fathers do because that is our mission in life. That is what our mission that was given to us by God. Or do we quietly say to the doctor, hey, this is too much for me. Why don't you just end the child's life? Make it convenient because suffering is hard. You're right, suffering is hard. Christ did it on the cross. Suffering is hard. And it's hard because we love. I often have patients come into me who are in the depths of grief. And they will say, when will it end? And my response is, how much did you love them? And they will often say, they were my entire life. They were there in my darkest moments, and they allowed me to achieve the greatest successes in my life. And my response is, the grief will never go away because the love will never go away. You will carry that love for the rest of your life. And that's the gift. In Virginia, we're also, as we face, and I'm going to go into the amendment, but I also want to talk about the end of life. Because just as they're attacking life at the very beginning, they are attacking it at the end. With convenience killing. But one of our elected officials calls it medical assistance in dying. And I gave a talk about abortion, and one of the people in the audience came up to me and afterwards and said, hey, they want to do it to us. And this man was a senior citizen. I said, yes, they do. Because we have become so callous to sitting with people as they are dying and giving them the love that they need. And it's more convenient to just pick a time. We're going to have the death ceremony tomorrow. God has been completely abandoned. As we look at all of this, I want to bring up something called moral guilt. So one of the things that, and this is typically a term that's used in the military and among veterans who have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is because often in the military they are given orders. Sometimes they have to kill someone. That is the nature of war. But sometimes they are given orders and they follow orders that they know are wrong. And they carry that pain with them. But moral guilt extends way beyond that. It's occurring in our classrooms and in our churches or at book clubs. When someone says, I'm pro-abortion and these are all the reasons I'm pro-abortion, and we stay silent because we don't want to rock the boat. We stay silent in the hospital because we don't want to lose our job. We stay silent because it's our neighbor. I'm not encouraging brawls, but I am encouraging simple words. I'm sorry, I disagree with you. I believe life is a gift from God and begins at conception. I hope someday you're open to hearing that. And you don't have to say any more. You've planted the seed. It's about planting seeds and encouraging people that sit next to you. Maybe I can do something else. Maybe I can do a little more. One of the sad realities of abortion is that 60% of those who have abortions are young Christian women, mothers, who attend church on a regular basis. 60%. Where are they hearing the message of life? Where are they hearing that this isn't a difficult moment, but they can choose life? I've been practicing psychiatry for over 30 years, and I treat many women who have had abortions. It is not unusual that they have been in my practice for over 10 and sometimes 15 years before they tell me that they have had an abortion. And in that time, for some of those women, I cannot count the number of times that they have tried to kill themselves, the number of times they've been in the psychiatric hospital because of thoughts of suicide, the amount of self-injurious behavior, the amount of substance abuse. They don't get over it. I have women tell me that every time that they go to celebrate their nephew's birthday, they cry because they were pregnant at the same time, but they chose abortion and the family member chose life. I have mothers that have told me every day I wake up and I know the exact age of my son or daughter. The first day of school, when they would have graduated from high school, all of those developmental milestones they keep in their heart and they grieve. And it isn't a one-way street. It isn't just mothers. It's fathers. Fathers also live with deep regret And many will say they block it out, they don't care. But their callous lifestyle is not fulfilling to them. They often get deep into substance abuse. And there is not joy. There is deep sadness. One of my patients would regularly dream of a baby. He said, "It's my son. I took my girlfriend to the abortion clinic because that's what she wanted. And I didn't have the guts to say, we can choose something different." We have taken the strength of masculinity away from our men. The pro-abortion side, men don't count. They don't carry the child. Men do count. Their voices count. Their strength counts. And we need to raise young men who accept responsibility and say, you know, this wasn't something I thought I would be doing, but I'm here. And I'm going to own responsibility because that's what being a man is. That's what being a woman is. To be a person of character. To be a person that says, you know what, I can face obstacles. And I'm willing to do the things that are necessary to help my girlfriend, my wife, bring this child to term. That's the strength we need to be instilling in our young people. In our good Christian churches, 50% are not registered to vote. I was alarmed at that. I had a pastor say from the pulpit, I know all of you are registered to vote and are going to vote the correct way. And I'm looking back and going, hold it. I know the stats. Does he know the stats? Why aren't we having voter registration at every church? But further, many people will say, well, my family is pro-life and that's all that counts. If I'm living I'm going to church, I'm living a good Christian life, I'm telling my kids that they're going to be pro-life, but my neighbors, they made a different church. They made a different decision. How am I going to minister to them? How do I speak to them in love and send them a message? And how is it that our neighbors that are sitting in the pew next to us are willing to be silent? When I've been out in front of abortion clinics, which is an experience, I've learned a few things from my husband, who does it on a regular basis. And when you're out there, you get flipped off a lot. People scream and yell all kinds of wonderful things. Creative sometimes. And one of the things that we learned very quickly is we wave and smile at everybody. And you think, why? They just flipped you off. They just called you this string of expletives. The car behind them doesn't know that. And we wave, we give them thumbs up. because it sends a message to the person behind them. Hold it, that car in front of them, they might be pro-life. Oh, man, I wouldn't have thought that, okay? And I also watch the faces. And you have women who will drive like this. And you can tell that if they squeezed any harder, that steering wheel was going to come off in their hands. And it's the person next to them you also want to look at. Because sometimes they're not in the same boat. And I've had couples drive by, the man will wave, and the woman will be like, ah. I had a man say to me, I hate all of you, but I really hate you. And I smiled and waved. Because they don't like joy. They don't see that the work and the people outside their clinics are joyful. They come and they pray. And it can be a very sad time. You can make it that. But it's an opportunity to bear witness. And do you want to be a joyful witness to the Lord? Yes. You want to be a witness that says, hey, you don't have to be in this parking lot. You don't have to drive in here sad and scared. You can choose something else. And maybe when they leave and they see that joy on your face, they will say, maybe I'm not going to take the pill. Maybe I'm going to choose something else. Because there was joy there. And I don't have joy right now. And it is the gift of God that gives us that joy, that causes us to go out and to speak and be at crisis pregnancy centers, to share joy. Because that's what human life is. It is a joy. It is a gift. And we need to share that. One of the alarming statistics that we have is that the birth rate in North Korea, communist totalitarian North Korea, is higher than the United States of America. What does North Korea know that we don't? What North Korea figured out is that if we don't have babies, we don't have a country. They also said to the doctors, the OBGYNs, if you perform an abortion, you're going to prison. Interesting. North Korea. United States of America, Planned Parenthood celebrates the number of abortions that doctors do. They get plaques. Look at the dichotomy. When we look at the abortion amendment, it is the most radical legislation in the world. And it was written, and the people talk about, the language is very vague. Okay? It's deliberate. It was legally written that way because it reaches a standard called strict scrutiny. That means to overturn this constitutional amendment or to have any legislation against it, we must show and prove to the court the highest level of scrutiny. So people say, we'll just vote it out the next year. No, that's not going to happen. And that is why everyone needs to wake up and own responsibility for this. We can turn this around with this election, and I believe that Virginia is a pro-life state. We have been suckered into believing that we are not. Currently, as we've learned, abortion is legal really until birth. We need 2 doctors in the last trimester. 2 abortionists, there you go. Not hard to find. But the lies are real. What do they tell us? We have to have abortion because it's going to save women's lives. And if we don't have abortion, women are going to die. And I don't want my daughter to die. We were at a hearing in the city of Richmond, and a father stood up, and that's exactly what he said. I don't want my daughter to die of an abortion. And I'm an elective abortion of your grandchild. That's what you're supporting. Because 96% of abortions are elective. But the left would have you hear, well, they're all because the mom's life is in danger. They use the ectopic pregnancy. And I was just at a medical conference, and I had a doctor there who spoke about abortion was necessary because of ectopic pregnancies. And I went, where did you go to medical school? They should take your license. Why? Taking the fallopian tube or using medications in an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion. An elective abortion is the deliberate, calculated, purposeful killing of an unborn child. What do you do in an ectopic pregnancy? The pregnancy that is not viable. You remove the disease. The disease is the fallopian tube. That is not, if the woman had a cancerous uterus, you could remove the cancerous uterus, the child inside would die. But that was not your intent. Your intent was to remove the cancerous uterus. But we have physicians that don't even know the difference. We learned about viability. I have a great story about viability. My neighbor, who was in his mid-40s, was born at 21 weeks. He is very much alive. He is a nurse practitioner, surgical nurse practitioner, and works at one of the major hospitals. And he said, I was on a vent for the first 4 years of my life. I said, you know you're supposed to be dead. He goes, yeah, I've heard that a lot. I never listened. Thank God, and neither did his parents. He lives a very full life. So, minimizing the life and his risk. What you also have to understand is in the last trimester, particularly the last trimester, if you're going to do an abortion, you have to dilate the cervix. It takes 3 days. So if mom's life is in danger, you can do an emergency C-section, 20 minutes. Okay, so explain to me, we can do an emergency C-section, try to save the life of the baby, save the life of the mother. It takes 20 minutes. We've separated them. The 2 patients who were in one body are now 2 patients separate. We can work to save both. But the medical establishment and the OBGYNs will say, well, better to kill the kid. No. They also bring up, the child might be deformed, might have mental retardation, might have any number of things. All right? Anybody have an adolescent child? Had them? I'm glad they're over that stage. I was thinking after I got through adolescence, the 20s would be easier. They were harder. I love my daughters, but there are times that I've earned every gray hair I have, but I wouldn't give it up. All right? We like to point to something simple and say, that's an inconvenience I can't handle. How do you know? You've never tried. Gave up. You walked away. And all that child is asking for is love and protection. That's not hard. That's innate. We can pick up a child and love them for as long as we have them, because there are no guarantees in life. None. And we also forget that we don't do this alone. God is there. I can't say that more forcefully. God is present. There's a celebrity, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, who became a Christian. And he became a Christian when his wife delivered and almost died. And he said, in that moment, I recognized there was something bigger than me. That there absolutely was a power greater than myself. And it was present as he was sobbing outside of her room. We have to open our hearts to that presence. I'm a psychiatrist, and a lot of what we're taught in medical school and even residency fellowship is, you don't talk about God. You have to, reach people where they're at, and, God interferes with medicine. And we sort of just accept that, Sadly, we accept that. But as a physician, God is there. And why? It's because how do you explain, why did I think to ask this question on this day at this time? Why did I, out of the blue, think, maybe we ought to do a titer. Maybe I ought to check this level. Maybe I ought to ask this family history question. And then you follow through on those questions and you get, oh, wow, that test came back positive. We're going to be able to do something. But without God, patients feel that everything is up to them. We put the crises of their lives and of the world upon their shoulders, and we ask them to, you can fix it, just tough it out. How callous are we? Rather, what we should be saying to our patients is, are you open to God? Can God be a part of this moment? You don't have to carry all of these things by yourself. God is there. Allow God to support you in your pain, in your challenges, in your grief. And as physicians, we have to check ourselves. We are not God. We may have a limited amount of skills, but our skills are limited. God's are not. I had a patient come in the other day, and he has been suffering for a long time, and one of the things that happened is he lost his voice. And he had had a very severe coughing fit, and his wife prayed over him. And the next day, he woke up, and his voice had returned. No explanation. So he comes into my office and he said, I had never heard his normal voice. Okay. I said, do you notice what's different? And I struggled a little bit. I said, it's my voice. It's back. And I went, tell me what happened. So he told me the story. And I said, do you mind if I document this in the chart? He said, sure. What are you going to say? I said, patient has a return of his voice, cannot be explained in any other manner, medically, but for the grace of God. I like writing that in the chart. I wish more doctors would write those things in the chart. I know you guys have to go. I want to go back to the amendment. So we have language that is strict scrutiny. This is we are killing babies up until birth and after because the House and Senate had the opportunity to pass protection for a baby born alive. They declined. Senator Survell from Fairfax when confronted about this in a meeting, said, well, I just didn't understand the bill. No, he perfectly well understood the bill. They also took away parental rights. And it isn't just for abortion. All right? So if a minor child wants to go in and have surgical procedures to end their reproductive cycle, that can occur without parental consent. They can sterilize themselves. They can receive hormone blocking agents. IVF is unlimited and unchecked. What does that mean? That means anyone can have a baby via surrogate. Anyone. I want you to think about that. That means pedophiles can have a child through a surrogate. That means you could be a couple and you could have 22 children via surrogates. You say, oh, no. Dr. Furey, you're crazy. Why would anybody have 22 children, particularly under the age of 5? Maybe they wanted a big family. No, a couple in California had 22 children under the age of 5. What do you think that they were doing that for? Child trafficking. It will make Virginia a haven for human trafficking. And if you go to the abortion clinics enough, you'll notice that the same cars drop people off. Those women are being trafficked. There is nothing to ensure safety for mothers and their unborn children. Just find out in your local area when the last time the health department visited an abortion clinic. Yeah. Because, women's health care, women who go in for an abortion, we can just dismiss them. So when they go from the abortion clinic to the ER, because the uterus has been perfed, and when you make Virginia a drive-through state for abortion, she has an abortion, she's now driving home, and she's hemorrhaging. Because doctors who do abortions aren't usually the top of the class, they're usually, and even if they are, they're really not concerned about the welfare of the mother or the child because they just killed the child. You have to have a heart of stone. So when the OBGYNs stand up before the General Assembly and they say, this is because we care for our mothers, they are lying. Unequivocally lying. There is also no regard for what's happening in terms of organ harvesting. So one of the big things is informed consent. We want to have informed consent for everything, right? Yeah. So what many women are told when they go in for an abortion is, would you like to donate tissue? The tissue that we remove, so just tissue, cells, just a blob. Do you want to donate that? It would be good for science. Sure, Let me sign the dotted line. What's really happening? They are deliberately doing that abortion in order to protect the organs, and then they dissect those organs out and they sell them. You can now get a subscription to fetal organ parts. Further, 61% of those organs donated come from minority women. This is who we're trafficking. We're still trafficking minorities. We just don't tell them. Going off the last statistics, 96% of abortions are elective. 3%, 0.3%, because the mother's life is at risk. 0.4%, or approximately, give or take, for rape and incest. 1.2% because of fetal abnormality. And I want to tell you something about that. Doctors are wrong, and statistics are wrong. Both in my practice and my husband's practice, we have had women come into our offices and say they told me I should have an abortion because this is the lab work. The baby's going to have a fetal abnormality and it's not going to live. I don't want to have an abortion. Okay, we'll support you. What happened on the day of birth? Baby was born, no fetal abnormality, none, 0. Baby was 100% normal. How many women are told a lie? And I'm going to challenge the medical establishment because they wanted organs. That is how much I distrust the medical establishment. But this is not an evening without hope, because you are all here. And your presence here is because you give hope to women at the Pregnancy Crisis Center. You give hope by your very presence, by the fact that that center is open. And you should walk around the city of Lynchburg and saying, hey, do you know about the Crisis Pregnancy Center? What a wonderful place it is. Everyone should be wearing shirts that say, I'm pro-life and proud of it. I'm starting to wear them to the gym, and I want people to know I'm pro-life. I have a t-shirt that says, the body inside my body's not my body. My daughters say, you're really not going to wear that, Mom? And I said, yeah, I am. We have to be bold. And if women say, take that off, it's distressing to me. No, I don't have to. First Amendment. Okay? We need to wear them to school. We need to have our kids wear them to school. We need the boys to wear them to school. That we are part of a life revolution. We are going to care about life and promote life in every aspect of our lives. And we're going to sing it from the rooftops. That is our mission. It is to allow life to be respected and loved and cared for and cherished. Because God created them, male and female, in His image. Wear a t-shirt that says, I was created in the image of God, and so were all of my children and all of my grandchildren. Wear a t-shirt that lists all your kids on it, all your grandkids, all the neighbors on it. I celebrate life. I celebrate life every day. Create posters for in front of your yard signs that have an unborn baby on them and simply say, life valuable. Choose it. You can just put a photo of an unborn baby on the front of your, out in your yard with all the other political signs with no words on it. That enough will be a testament. You need to let people know that this is a life. It is not a clump of cells. It is not tissue. And when the neighbor says, got to take that one down, or the neighbor steals it, all right, you put up another one. You make a flag and you put it on the front of your house. We cannot be silent. There is too much at stake. Because to be silent is to cause moral harm. And this room is not about moral harm. This room is about accepting the challenge and taking that banner and riding into battle. Thank you.